The Great British Motorcycle Company Triumph has witnessed several trials and tribulations over the course of the past 100 years. It's lived through many wars, fire outbreaks, and failures, but as its name showcases, it has always triumphed. Here is the intriguing story of how Triumph motorcycles grew from being a small building in Coventry, England, to becoming one of the top motorcycle producers in the world. It all started with a German businessman called Siegfried Bettmann. In the late 1800s, there was a bicycle craze in Britain, and only the smartest people got into the business of selling it. Bettmann had heard about this craze and decided to move from Nuremberg, Germany to Coventry, England, to start a small company that would ship bicycles from Germany to Britain. In 1884, he successfully established this business. However, the German didn't limit himself to the sale of bicycles. He also sold imported German sewing machines, which he sold with the brand name Bettmann. A few years later, he rebranded and changed the company's name, first to New Triumph Company Limited and then to Triumph Cycle Company Limited. With the business thriving, many wealthy people trooped in as investors. One was John Dunlop, the man who holds the patent for the pneumatic tire, and another was a German engineer called Moritz Schulte. One day, the German engineer who had years of experience called Bettmann aside and told him it was best they started producing their own bicycles. He explained that the resources at their disposal were enough to start a small assembly line and could earn them more wealth and recognition. Unsurprisingly, he took his advice, and in 1888, they bought an old ribbon-making factory in Coventry and set it up to make bicycles. They struggled at first, as with any business that's just starting out. But once they got the hang of it, Triumph bicycles rolled out of the factory in multiple numbers. Bettmann couldn't be more pleased, but the ever-visionary Schulte knew that they could achieve much more. So in 1895, the German engineer imported a motorcycle made by Hildebrand and Wolfmuller just to study it. The goal was to get Triumph to start producing them. And what better way to learn than to study its features up close? The studies went well, and Schulte was sure he could replicate the design. But Bettmann found out about the English law, which limited the bike's power. The law stated that powered vehicles should have a 4-mile-per-hour speed limit, and to use them, a man must walk ahead of each waving a red flag. Who would buy a motorcycle with such rules in place? So Bettmann asked Schulte to hold off on his desire to produce a bike. However, things changed in the 1900s. Going into the new century, motorcycles became more popular, and Britain couldn't afford to be behind on such amazing technology. And in 1902, the first Triumph motorcycle, known as Number 1, was produced. However, the design was basically fitting a single-cylinder, a 2-horsepower Minerva engine from Belgium on one of the company's bicycles. People were obviously skeptical about the new bike's efficiency, so sales didn't pick up as anticipated. But regardless, the company continued to find ways to upgrade their motorcycle. The next year, Triumph decided to return to its roots to produce top-tier bikes. A subsidiary was opened up in Germany, and they began building the motorcycles there. The Minerva engines were tossed out and were replaced with much better engines from Jap, a famous engine producer. This time, the bikes were more efficient and just as desired. They sold 500 units that very year. By 1907, the annual production rate was 1,000 units. In 1908, they produced a new model that came with a variable pulley to help with difficult slopes. Although in the present time, the technology would be very stressful to use, as riders have to get off the bike and move the belt by hand to change gears, during the time, it was exceptional. In fact, with this technology, Jack Marshall won the single-cylinder class at the second ever Isle of Man TT race, with his Triumph running at an average speed of 40 miles per hour. In 1910 through to 1913, Triumph added and removed features on their bike to improve its efficiency. It was during this period the first practical clutch was designed. Most bikes were fitted with foot pegs instead of pedals, and Schulte created a prototype 600cc vertical twin. 2 other models were also introduced, and the annual unit sale hit 3,000. Then, in 1914, the war came. Everyone might be quick to assume that the First World War would severely affect the company, because, come to think of it, Triumph had German roots but was based in British lands. However, the war came as a blessing in disguise, as the company was chosen by the Allied military service to be a military motorcycle supplier. This was what led to the birth of the iconic Model H, Trusty, in 1915. This motorcycle was exceptional. It was powered by an air-cooled 499cc single-cylinder engine with a top speed of around 50 miles per hour. It could be ridden at speeds of over 40 mph for hundreds of miles a day, and the British military forces couldn't be more pleased. By the time the war ended in 1918, Model H's were in service with Allied forces on all war fronts, meaning Triumph had sold over 30,000 units. In 1920, a year after Schotte bade the company farewell, Triumph produced the 550cc Type SD, the company's first bike to have a chain-driven rear wheel. The SD reportedly stands for spring drive, which is an early form of a cush drive. And in 1921, the bicycle-style rim brakes were replaced by drum brakes because the recent models, such as the 20-horsepower Model R, were giving off more power than what the bicycle-style rim brakes can produce. Then, in 1923, the 350cc Model LS became the first Triumph with an oil pump driven by the motor. 1925 started well for the company, as they released the widely accepted 500cc Model P. Everyone wanted one because, besides being extremely affordable, owning a Triumph was such a big deal back then. However, many customers were utterly disappointed because the Model P was a big flop. It had a poor build, and the efficiency that was promised was non-existent. This wrong move affected the sales as everyone found it hard to trust any Triumph product. And engineers were forced to go back to the drawing table. Candles were burned, and sleepless nights were had, but Triumph fought its way back to people's hearts, and by 1927, they were producing 30,000 units annually. In 1929, the company's Wall Street stock market crashed, causing it to scramble, and to stay afloat, they sold off the German subsidiary. When things didn't get better, creditors requested that Bettmann be deposed as the head of the company, and their request was granted, bringing an end to an era. In 1932, the notable engine designer Val Page joined the firm, and he tried to save the company from further collapse. He quickly produced several new motors, which included a 150cc two-stroke and 250, 350, and 500cc four-strokes. In 1936, the company's motorcycle and car businesses were split, as Jack Sangster, the owner of Ariel Motorcycles, bought the motorcycle division. Sangster believed Triumph had great potential and only faced setbacks because of a few hurdles, like the removal of Bettmann. So the first thing he did was hire Edward Turner, the exceptional designer who worked on Ariel Square 4, and then reinstituted Bettmann as the chairman. With the reins of power back to where it belonged, the company soon regained its stance. The next year, Triumph unveiled the 498cc Speed Twin T100. This bike was loved from the very beginning. Besides its incredible engine, which gave off 27 horsepower and could reach incredibly high speeds at 90 miles per hour, the Speed Twin was a sight to behold. It had a sleek and rugged look, lightweight frame, and comfortable Springer seat, among several other features that made it stand out. Due to the wide acceptance of this model, it became the inspiration for subsequent Triumph bikes in the next 40 years. Besides that, it caught the interest of a motorcycle distributor in America, and soon the Triumph became very popular among American bike lovers. But this win didn't last for long, as World War II came. The Second World War came with nothing but destruction and catastrophe. The company's major factory in Coventry got bombed, and they were forced to put a hold on production. For 2 years, no Triumph bike was produced, and it seemed like they'd never get back on their feet. But in 1942, Triumph rose from the ashes as a phoenix, and a new plant was opened in Meriden, England. With their factories opened, the military officials returned to request the sales of motorcycles, and by 1945, they had delivered over 50,000 units to them. They also produced other products, such as stretcher carriers, generators, steering housings, and aircraft components for the military. When the war ended, they resumed the production of bikes for civilians and focused on improving on the Speed Twin. By 1948, Triumph was back to producing 12,000 units of motorcycles per year, with more than half sold overseas. Also, in 1948 was when the first trial bike by the company was introduced. The 500cc trophy TR5 was, of course, inspired by the Speed Twin. However, it was made to have better handling and high-level 2-in-1 exhaust because of its off-road use. It was also named Trophy in honor of the British team that won the ISDT using the bike. The next year, the 650cc Thunderbird 6T was introduced, and together with the trophy, it won the hearts of American racers. With Triumph already a favorite in the United States, it was only paramount for the company to form a US-based corporation that would help in the distribution of Triumph motorcycles on America's East Coast. So they did that in 1950, and to no one's surprise, Americans soon became their top consumers. In 1951, Jack Sangster sold the company to the UK-based motorcycle company BSA, and 2 years later, the 149cc OHV Terrier was released. In 1954, a tuned version of the Thunderbird called the Tiger 110 was released. And the next year, Johnny Allen stole the show on the Bonneville Salt Flats in a Streamliner, powered by a tuned 650cc T-Bird motor. Triumph held this incredible record for the next 15 years. Then the TR6, which was made purely for the US Triumph lovers, was introduced. This model later became popular with desert racers. In 1957, the company revealed the exquisite 350cc 21. It was such a beauty that the workers at Triumph were certain they'd have to work overtime to keep up with the orders. But that dream didn't come true because it was a commercial failure. Never one to stay down when pushed, Triumph released a game-changer in 1959, the great T120 Bonneville 650. This sporty and powerful bike was a slow creeper in the sense that people didn't immediately fall in love with it, but after a while of production, it became a popular sensation among motorcycle enthusiasts. Everyone wanted one, and it was soon categorized alongside the likes of Harley-Davidson's as one of the cool ones. The 60s was a period of incredible growth for the company, not only because prominent designers like Burt Hopwood and Doug Haley joined the team, but because the stripped-for-racing version of the Bonneville called the T120C was introduced. Buddy Elmore won the Daytona 200 with a 500cc Tiger. The Gyronaut X1, powered by two Triumph 650cc motors, got to 245 miles per hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats, and the revolutionary 750cc triple engine, which powers the Triumph Trident and the BSA Rocket 3, got introduced. However, the 70s was a different ballgame. Things were quite intense. It started out great with Uphill winning the TT on a triple in 1970, and Bonneville getting an upgraded frame by Rob North. However, in 1973, things came crashing when the BSA group, which includes Triumph, acquired a huge loss. The loss was so great that it caused the company to close down BSA and channel all their resources to Triumph, and they began working endlessly to get back on track. That year, the Triumph X75 Hurricane was released, and Burt Hopwood began working on a modular engine based on an overhead cam, 200cc single that can be produced as 1000cc across the frame 5. Unfortunately, the engine never got to be produced, and things took an even more awful turn for the company. By the end of the year, they had to merge with Norton just to survive. But it was barely a means for survival because the company went bankrupt in 1977. Other companies would have counted their losses and moved on, but Triumph still hung on. They struggled to get the debt written off and fought to keep the factory running. But in 1983, the Meriden factory was forced to close its doors. The world thought that was the end for Triumph, but an unlikely savior came to the rescue. Later that year, an English property developer, John Bloor, bought the remains of the Meriden factory and decided to keep the name. Bloor first licensed the Triumph name to a small shop that continued to assemble several Bonnevilles per day until one day in 1985. Bloor saw that the Triumph entity could be completely salvaged if a proper effort was made, so he built a subdivision on the site of the old Meriden factory, and then bought another site in nearby Hinckley where he set up a new factory with several prototyping tools, and then work began immediately to get Triumph running. However, it was all kept a secret. In 1987, the engineers at the factory designed a whole new set of engines, the first being a 1200cc 4-cylinder. Bloor pumped in at least 60 mil of his own money to keep the factory running and acquire more tools, and by 1990, the company was ready to unveil their new bikes. When Triumph returned, it did so with a big splash, as it unveiled 6 new models at the Cologne show. There were the Trident 750 and 900 triples, the sports-oriented Daytona 750 triple and 1004, and the Touring Trophy 900 triple and 1204. These machines were so impressive, especially because no one expected them to compete well against their Japanese contemporaries after being away for so long. These performances caused the Triumphs to return on the map of motorbikes to look out for. In 1994, the powerful Speed Triple model was introduced. This bike wasn't trying to replicate the Japanese design. It was a force on its own, and Triumph lovers couldn't be more pleased. That year, Tiger Adventure bike was also introduced, and Triumph of America was founded. And by the next, Triumph of America was producing approximately 12,000 units of vehicles annually. The rest of the 90s was fairly good for the brand, and it looked like the good graces would go into the 2000s, but disaster struck the year of the company's 100th anniversary. 2002 was the company's official 100th year anniversary, and while they were preparing to celebrate, a huge fire gutted its main assembly plant in Hinckley. It would have been a real hassle to rebuild the factory if not for the robust insurance plan which covered the expenses. And on a good note, they were able to refit the factory with state-of-the-art tools upon renovation. Also that year, they opened Triumph's first facility in Thailand, and the super sports 4-cylinder model Daytona 600 was launched. In 2004, the Triumph Rocket 3 was rolled out of the factory's doors, having a motor that could displace over 2,000 cc. However, it performed better than anyone thought it would. Then, the next year, the Daytona 600's engine was swapped to 650 cc, earning it a comfortable spot in the real-world middleweight class. The year after, it got swapped again to a 675 cc with a triple engine that would end up earning several awards. In 2007, the Mini Speed Triple, or the Triumph Street Triple, was introduced. This bike was a top player. Fitted with a 675cc 3-cylinder engine, it combined the power of the Daytona with the design and entertainment of the Speed Triple. That year, another factory in Thailand opened up, and the next, the Bonneville line got fuel injection. The Thunderbird Cruiser. This beast was powered by a 1600cc parallel twin engine, nearly double in size over the brand's other twin-cylinder cruisers, and could go as high as 60 miles per hour at 2,200 RPM. This cruiser was so impressive that it got voted the Cruiser of the Year by the US magazine Cycle. In 2012, 110 years since it was founded, Triumph opened another subsidiary in Brazil. Its global annual sales rose to 50,000. Also that year saw the release of the 1215cc Tiger Explorer and more trophy models. In 2015, Triumph decided to return to its roots and produce upgraded versions of several of their classic models. The likes of the Tiger Explorer, the new range of Bonnevilles, such as the 900cc Street Twin, the 1200cc Bonneville T120 and T120 Black, and 1200cc Thruxton and Thruxton R, and the all-new Speed Triple were reintroduced to the market. The next year, they took their modern classics range to a whole new level by unveiling the likes of the Bonneville Bobber, Bonneville T100, Street Scrambler, Street Cup, and T100 Black. The brutal beauty Bonneville Bobber was a cruiser with a 1200cc liquid-cooled SOHC engine. This bad boy's motor delivered 77 horsepower at 6,100 RPM. It also came with single front disc brakes, slash-cut style exhaust pipes, a swing cage placed on a mono-shock absorber, and an adjustable solo seat. All these indicate that the Bobber was carefully crafted with state-of-the-art features to make it an object of desire. The Bonnie T100 was also a star. With its 900cc liquid-cooled SOHC 270 degrees parallel twin, it was able to crank out 57 amazing horsepower at 5,400 RPM. However, the Street Scrambler was a more attractive pick for those into rugged-looking bikes. The Scrambler was less like the Bonneville and more like a Ducati monster. When it comes to horsepower, it only got 58 at 7,000 RPM. However, the altered firing interval allowed it to produce 90% of its maximum torque from as low as 2,500 RPM. Along with the prominent exhaust, it also got the vintage-style headlight protector and the alloy bash plate to give it the rugged outdoorsy image Triumph wanted to portray. Due to the immense similarities between the Street Cup and the Street Twin, we'd skip it to discuss the T100 Black. If you thought of this bike and imagined a classic-looking bike, you thought right. Powered by an 865cc double-cylinder 4-stroke parallel twin engine that could give off enough power to make any motorcycle rider impressed. It also came with a 5-speed gearbox, wire-spoked wheels, and rubber fork gaiters. But what made it stand out was its dark theme. Every single part of the bike was covered in black. No surprise there, really. In 2017, the revolutionary multi-award-winning Street Triple Range, fitted with a 765cc engine, was launched. The bike was awesome, but what made it stand out so much was the engine. This powerhouse was incredible, and it impressed the racing team Dorna so much that they agreed Triumph should be exclusive supplier of race-tuned engines for the Moto2 World Championship from the 2019 season onwards. In 2018, two legends returned to the Triumph lineup, the Speed Twin and Scrambler 1200. They came with incredible features that added all the required spice and excitement to the category. The next year, Triumph was back on the racing tracks as the engine supplier of the FIM Moto2 World Championship. The amazing Street Triple 765cc made its presence known at the race by acquiring an incredible 16-lap records and taking Alex Marquez to a historic first Triumph-powered championship win. While others were worrying about the pandemic, Triumph was worrying about dealing with the orders that came with the launching of the incredible Trident 660. This bike entered the market and rewrote the performance rules for middleweight bikes. This naked bike came with a water-cooled 660cc DOHC triple engine that cranked out 81 sweet ponies at 10,250 RPM. Triumph is over a century old, and its story is indeed the one of several ups and downs, but its ability to come back stronger every single time has made it a very endearing brand. Those who put in the work to keep Triumph running deserve so many accolades. So, are you a Triumph lover? Which of these models is your favorite? Kindly let us know in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.